Welcome in. It's Friday, November 22nd with the EBDB weekly update. I'm your host, Tim Sorrells, and back again with me is Brett Colleton. What's going on, Brett?
Tim, want to give a quick shout out to Danny Breslow for filling in when I wasn't able to. Real quick, new Kendrick Lamar album. Have you been listening?
Not my style, man.
Huge mistake. It is absolutely fantastic. Give it a listen this weekend.
All right, I'll think about it. Definitely not my music, but if you say so, I'll give it a shot.
It's really good. But I feel like the podcast has been spotty. My participation definitely missed a week here and there. What have you been up to? How's the time off been for you?
Life's good. I thought you took last week off because you were embarrassed about not starting a legal lineup and just, decided to give me a win. But I guess it's life things. That's a better excuse than just saying you were embarrassed about your performance.
I was in Austin, Texas, having the time of my life, and both the time change and the hangovers were the reason that I was not able to field a competitive lineup that we'll get to here when we cover Week 10 in very speedy fashion. But saw on the Instagram that you and the fam were in Disneyland. How'd that go?
It was good. Zoe enjoyed it. Ryan was more of a bystander, but he kind of just hung out, did his thing, and it was a good day. We all enjoyed it. There was no meltdowns, nothing crazy until the ride home. And that's kind of, you get about 30 minutes out of Disneyland and it's Zoe's in the back crying, Ryan's in the back crying, and Rachel and I are just like, all right, this is life. They both made it all day long without any meltdowns or fits. And it's just like they're exhausted and worn out.
What's the commute time from an end of Disneyland day back to your guys' house?
It was just over an hour and a half. So it wasn't too bad.
Not so bad.
Yeah.
But still, tantrums make that feel two or three times as long for sure.
Yeah, we made it down to San Clemente and stopped and got in and out because they both were screaming and figured if Ryan can be nursed for a second and calm him back down and then see if Zoe can then be resettled because she's being kept awake by Ryan screaming. And by that point, they both fell asleep at that point, which is kind of nice for us. So we got lucky.
Cool. Well, that concludes toddler time. So Tim, trade deadline this week. Anybody you are trying to trade with? Anything that you see? What are your thoughts as we approach the trade deadline with keeping keepers in mind?
You and I talked about this beforehand, but the teams are definitely separating of who's locked in for the playoffs and who's at risk. So it seems despite Alex's team being called fraudulent by a lot of people, seems to be locked in for the playoffs, regardless of if he's lucky or not, doesn't matter. And then it seems that you and Sam are pretty safe at this point. But the 6 and 5 teams down to the 4 and 7, there's a bit more risk involved there, which is, I think by the time this weekend plays out, we're going to see Sunday night. And if Chris and I, who have lost that game, we know we're not going to have a realistic chance to make it into the playoffs at that point. So you might see Chris and I selling pieces of things. And then you'll see some desperate teams at the top trying to get back into the matchup, so to speak, making some plays with either trading keepers or going after draft pick swaps. So it's definitely going to happen this week. We should see probably a few people shifting pieces. I don't think there's keeper swaps in play, though. I don't think there's any really highly valuable keepers this year who are running on their 2-year limit. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of that just one for ones that we might have in the past of people just resetting keepers, basically. But it might be people who want to stock up on stuff.
It is a weird place because with Katie being the only person who is legitimately mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. Don't get me wrong. She's got some real pieces that could be assets to the teams at the top. If myself or Sam or Lizzie or Brett loses 3 games in a row going forward, you could drop from being in playoff contention to fully out of the playoffs. And this is really your week to either bolster that lineup or potentially being in the red. So It'll be really interesting. This is a fun thing with a keeper league where it's like, hey, how confident are you in your team, and how much all in do you want to go? And I think going forward for the next like week or so, we should probably spend a little bit more time on kind of the playoff watch and the forecasting there. But the teams at the top seem pretty solid. And then you, Max, and Chris being a little bit on the bubble, need the wins that are in front of you in order to make the move to get into the upper echelon here.
Absolutely. The last thing I'm curious about is just the willingness to sell from the bottom teams. In the past, nobody wanted to be the person who displayed the dildo trophy in their house because that was kind of embarrassing. So that was a little bit of its own incentive to not sell too many pieces. And like, you want to sell a little bit, but not sell too much that you can't win at least one game in the losers bracket. I'm curious to see if now that the true punishment is gone, like there's still a trophy, it's still there, but it's nowhere near what it used to be. If people are willing to sell more pieces at this point. So we'll see.
As a dildo trophy presenter, I will say that was a big deterrent for me leaving this league for a little while and coming back. I know that the league loves when you and I talk about the NFL in general, but I do think it's important for us to discuss that this is the week where your team and my team are going to be locked in heated combat on Sunday. How are you feeling about Packers 49ers?
I'm feeling pretty good. And I'm going to admit here, I deliberately changed my attire because of this topic. I knew it was going to come up. So I'm like, I'm going to get my Packers hat. I was already wearing a green shirt today, so I had to go change my shirt because I can't be wearing too much green. That looks like I'm a crazy person. But yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about it. It's going to be fun. I was going to say, is this our next 529 bet? But I cannot, in good conscience, take your money when you don't have a starting team anymore. You don't have a quarterback. You don't have your defense. I'm not sure if this is going to be pretty.
It's definitely rough. Me and my group chat of 49ers fan friends full on had the conversation where it's like, hey, why do we not shut down McCaffrey with tendonitis, Kittle with his injuries, Purdy with his shoulder, and just be bad for the rest of the season in order to get a better draft pick, regroup, and be good again next year. But that being said, the Niners-Packers games are always a lot of fun. I do not expect Brandon Allen to be anything super special, but at the same time, like Christian McCaffrey getting healthier on a weekly basis, maybe there's some fun George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, Juwan Jennings stuff that happens. I'm still going to start Juwan Jennings this week, hoping for a miracle, but at the same time, I totally agree with you. I would not accept a bet in that sense for your team versus my team. The other big news of the day is the Giants acquiescing to Daniel Jones' request, where he asked for his release from a extension that he accepted not 4 months ago. So without getting into too many details, where do you think the best Daniel Jones landing spots would be going forward this year?
That's hard. Like, is it best for him or is it best for the team he's going to? Because the team he's going to, there's nowhere good that's going to help him, to be honest. Like, he's not going to go somewhere to help the team. All the teams, like, he's not a good enough player to, like, elevate anybody. But I think that if he's going to extend his career, it almost has to be the Raiders. I feel like that's the only team that's just in total dysfunction at the quarterback position where they can't decide who they want. It's a total disaster every week with that team. Like, who do they have anymore? Like, they're rotating between 3 guys. None of them are good. So in theory, he could have a starting job there if he wanted to sign with the Raiders. I can't think of another team who he'd actually help. Because even the Panthers, who are really bad, they can't afford to not let what's his name? Bryce get a shot to try to be good anymore. And even if they wanted to bench him, they're still better off with Dalton than they would be with Daniel Jones. So I'm not sure if there's anybody else out there.
I think it would take I would not be surprised if he cleared waivers, because if somebody was to pick him up off waivers, it costs your team $13 million this year.
He's going to clear waivers, 100%. Has to.
Yeah. And so to be signed as a free agent, which is not a bad pickup, I think it would take something of a significant injury. So ironically, like I think the first name that everybody brought up because it is the funniest option is Dallas.
Yeah,
but
that would be.
With Dak being hurt, that's actually a pretty good signing. They don't have a lot of faith in Trey Lance. Cooper Rush is not the answer. Maybe Daniel Jones is like a serviceable backup. He's not going to win you a ton of games, but at least he's there. But for instance, if Geno Smith was to get hurt in Seattle, or if David Carr, or not David Carr, Derek Carr was to get hurt in why can I not think of
New Orleans?
New Orleans. Then maybe Daniel Jones can fill in for a little bit. But it's like I think he is going to be one of those backups where next year he signs maybe for the Vikings, maybe for the Cardinals, like for a team to be the backup, and then the starter gets hurt. He comes in, he goes 2-1 in 3 games, and people are like, maybe Daniel Jones deserves another chance. And he's kind of that Gardner Minshew-esque player where it's like, should he be a starter? Should he be a backup? And he kind of plays that in-between role. I just can't believe that the Giants gave him a full-on, like, you are our guy contract. And then,
it was
6 weeks later, we're just like, you're out.
Was it that soon? I thought he had the contract 2 years ago, but it's really inconsequential if it was recently got an extension this offseason or the year before. Either way, it was a bad call on their part because he had flaws, and very clearly he's not.
He has a ton of flaws.
I think I have 2 more thoughts. Tennessee would be an interesting one this year because their team's again a disaster.
That's a good one.
So that could be interesting in terms of like if he wants to be a starter, but if he wants to be good again.
Let me stop you real quick.
Yep.
4-year, $160 million extension in the 2023 season.
Okay.
So a year ago, he signed a 4-year extension.
Yeah, exactly. If he wants to be good again, he goes to the Rams.
Ooh, wow, Tim, that's a really good. He could sign a multi-year deal with the Rams, sit behind Matt Stafford, play on injured weeks, and then take over that job. Mm-hmm. That's really good. He could also, similarly, he could go and be Jared Goff's backup in Detroit.
Right.
He'd be a super competent backup in Detroit. That's a really good. Do you have any other options for him?
No, not really. I feel like that's in terms of just people who like he needs to go to a team where the coach is good enough to take advantage of his skills. Because if McVay could make Jared Goff look good and competent in LA, and an older Matt Stafford who doesn't have quite the same arm strength and whatnot, make him look good and perform well, then maybe he could figure out how to make that offense work with a flawed quarterback. And he's got weapons. I mean, if Kupp stays, if Puka stays, like you have 2 very good receivers, and then Kyron's a good running back. So it's like, in terms of the offense, you don't need to be a star. And I feel like that's just been McVay's routine, is that you don't need a star quarterback as long as you call the plays well and have good supporting cast and a good defense.
Absolutely.
Which they don't have this year, but neither here nor there.
Yeah, 100%.
So we'll see. That'll be interesting here. I wouldn't. We have some pipe dreams here. I think the more realistic expectation is that nobody wants him, and he's a career backup and becomes nothing the rest of the way out. I think that's actually the most realistic answer.
It will be super interesting to see what happens with waivers and then what contracts he gets from there, because he is a generally competent NFL quarterback, but the extension in a tier where, like, how can you bring him in without it being a distraction? Mm-hmm. So it will definitely be interesting. I have a lot of fear that the 49ers bring him in to back up Brock Purdy, and we have to deal with that going forward. So I hope he goes somewhere else.
I think the 49ers are smarter than that. So fingers crossed for you.
Thank you.
All right, let's get into the Week 10 review. We'll crank through that one as we missed it last week, and then get into Week 11.
All right.
right. First one here was Chris versus Max. Max came into this one favored 139 to 131. Came out ahead pretty easily, 130 to 111. This is a matchup that I think Max needed to win with where he's sitting at this part of the season. And also same for Chris. They both needed that one.
100%. This game hinges on maybe a couple better options on Chris's bench, but Chase Brown with 22 and Kareem Hunt with 17 really move this along. So I think this was a really even match where the better picks prevailed, and that's about it.
Nope, you're not wrong there. Next one here was Denny versus Katie, and Katie surprised, won 133 to 111. Denny was favored going into this one, so kind of this is Katie's shock win, which she hasn't had too many of this season. Only 2 wins, and Denny's one of them.
Katie's wide receivers are very bad. Her running backs are very good. Looks like, almost 80, 90 points from her running backs in this week. So Brock Purdy outplaying Josh Allen, and then 90 points from 4 running backs on her squad. It's a good win.
And the funny thing is McCaffrey was the 3rd best running back, which cracks me up.
Totally.
But Hubbard had a great week. Played really well. Connor looked really good. She got lucky that Deontay Johnson, she won with Deontay Johnson in the lineup because we've been talking for a bit. That guy needs to be benched, and she finally dropped him. So he's finally off the team and can't be started by mistake anymore.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, he's in a bad spot. But Denny's team didn't play very well last week. Let's just leave it at that. Didn't look good for him.
Yep.
Next one here is me versus you. We talked about this one. You gift wrapped this for me. It was supposed to be a close matchup here. I was favored going into it by 1 point, but you not starting somebody early in the day and then last second swapping out Nico Collins because Max ratted on me. Told you to go start a legal lineup. But you still ended up losing this one by quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if I had slotted Juwan Jennings in for Amari Cooper, it would have been it's right there. But at the same time, I was fully distracted in week 10. I was not on top of it. And so not to say that you deserve this win, but it was a fault of my own. And it is what it is. We had literally the 2 lowest totals this week. So Congratulations on your W. It is what it is.
It was a freebie, not earned. My team was shit. And having to start Achane and Mostert is not desirable. And the results were not good. Our next one here was Alex versus Sam, with Alex going in favored 125 to 118, and Sam kind of smoked him, 152 to 132. Alex still sits on top of the league, though, despite Sam coming on strong at this point.
Sam seems very good. Alex, I feel like, continues to get very lucky, but he does have the Phillies defense continues to be great. He got 20 points out of Phillies defense and 30 points out of Jalen Hurts and still lost by 20 points. So I think that speaks to how good Sam's team is and how well constructed Alex's team is as well. He is not scoring the most points in the league, but at the same time, he continues to win games. So even though he lost this one, I think his team is well constructed to be successful going forward.
I think the Jordan Mason drop-off has been one of the biggest hits for his team, of having a guy who's every week starter and performing well to being totally irrelevant. That definitely has hurt him. And I still don't understand the Flowers and Samuel trade for Jefferson, but that's I think he understood needed depth. I don't like it still. I would have rather had the one guy who should be better and you figure something else out, but we'll see if it pays off for him at the end of the season.
I was super disappointed. I made a similar trade request of Justin Jefferson and would have loved to have him on my team. But, I mean, this week we get into the next one. Brett versus Lizzie. Brett was favored by 8 points, ended up winning by 40. and Justin Jefferson was only 9 of those points. So he really put it on with the rest of his team. I mean, these Jamar Chase games are just absolutely ridiculous. I don't think we'll see them going forward, but he did have it in a fantasy championship week a couple years ago. So he is the kind of guy that you put on your team because he can put up those ridiculous numbers that will always win you a week. And goddamn, 55 points is absolutely nutty.
It's absurd. And he still got that with I want to say, decent week from Derrick Henry. And Bijan looked really good too, almost 30 points out of him. So like he had players who played really well. But yeah, it's like you can't always expect Josh Downs to get that. Do you trust him anymore with Richardson being his quarterback? He still played well the past couple weeks. We'll get into that for next week too, for week 11. But I mean, Brett has a very good team, and these
both of those teams are really great. They're both really, really talented.
They confuse the hell out of me, though. One week they look fantastic, look great, and the other week they look very ordinary. Like 135 from Lizzie, solid, good week.
So I think that the thing is like with teams like that, you want guys that can win you the week, and both of those teams have a ton of guys that can win you the week. Lizzie had 32 points from Lamar Jackson. That's huge. But if there's not the support from the rest of them, like I imagine in the playoffs, there's going to be some game where it's like 195 points to 185 points, where there's just this absolute influx of talent from the top 4 or 5 teams. And so this was just the rare opportunity where Lizzie's team looks very normal when on a weekly basis her team is generally absolutely crushing it.
If I'm going to call my shot right now, if both of these two teams make the playoffs, I don't see them getting buys. I would not be surprised at all to see one of these two teams get bounced in the first week of the playoffs because their team comes out of the gate and looks normal.
I think that the two teams that are most set up to get a bye are myself and Sam.
Agreed.
And then I think I fully see that the championship game could be Brett versus Lizzie.
Very well could be. But yeah, I think you're right that you and Sam are probably best set up for the buys. Alex, I imagine, drops off. We've been seeing it for a bit, and he hasn't. He's only lost 3 games all season because he just keeps running into the right people.
He's going to keep watching these and just laugh at our inability to predict anything about fantasy football. So good job, Alex.
Yep.
Good job having a good team.
Well, we didn't get week 10 right probably, so let's do you want to get week 11 wrong now too?
I would love it.
All right. Our next one here. First on the list was you versus Katie. You were initially favored 127 to 108. And Katie did not show up, and you abused her squad.
This is what we call a get-right game, my friend Tim. This is exactly what my squad needed after a point where I was not focused. The 25 points from Chris Boswell were spectacular. That is my kicker for the rest of the year. But, especially with Nico Collins only getting like 45% snap rate. No offense to Katie, but like this was just my team against it itself. So long as they performed, this was definitely going to be a W. And between Jared Goff, Chris Boswell, and my wide receivers, this went really well. So I'm very excited. I'm very happy. And I think I go into the trade deadline with a super strong and super solid squad.
The one comment for Katie's team is that she held out all season for Christian McCaffrey. And I don't want to say he looks ordinary, but he doesn't look like himself in terms of the points he's putting up. His first week back, I'm actually going to reload his stats and make sure I'm not misspeaking here. Yeah. 16 points last week.
Yep.
Very good. You should be happy with that. 14 points this week. But that's not week winning performances.
Winning, yeah.
And that's like that's all he did last year was win weeks by putting in multiple touchdowns. Yep. And she sat 9 weeks without him to expect him to come back to 25 plus points a week. That's the expectation. And he's just not doing that. So if we're going to talk at the end of the season about who's the dud of the year, I mean, 100% it's going to be him no matter what because he missed half the season. But if he if you had him all season long and only put up 14 or 16 points every week, you might still call that a dud pick with the 101.
I totally agree. It's really hard because he's such a focal point of that offense. But I think that with the amount of time that he missed, he dug Katie into such a hole that it's just really, really hard to get out of. So
yeah, and we're talking about people selling players at the end of the season. I feel like Christian McCaffrey is the one a lot of people want, and I think we've all heard from Katie. She's received an offer from all of us at this point for CMC. Is kind of what it sounds like, and she wants to stand pat. I'm not sure if it's worth the investment anymore. Like a lot of us made that bid probably week 1 back, but if we don't have Purdy, if this team is eliminated, do they ease him out? I feel like that becomes a risk of somebody, if an all-in team chooses McCaffrey as their guy, and Katie decides to sell. It'd be a tough spot to be in if the Niners shut down their stars or lessen the workloads at some point.
That's a really good point, Tim. I think as we get closer, especially as this league kind of leads up to the later weeks of the season, like you kind of got to start thinking about who's going to be intent on playing their starters. Like, similar, like I have Jared Goff. Jared Goff might not play in week 16 and week 17 gearing up for the playoffs. Like I probably need to start finding someone else to handle those weeks that's like focused on making the playoffs. So that's a really good point. I'm honestly glad that you brought it up, because as much as you say like, hey, I think I told you in the lead up before we started recording, as a Niners fan, like I want them to bench Christian and George Kittle and Joey Bosa to start tanking, because if we're not going to make the playoffs, then we're not going to win the Super Bowl. And that's what this team is built to be doing right now. And so it's like, hey, let's shut it down. Let's be bad. Let's get a better draft pick. Let's try again next year. And that's kind of where these bottom teams should be. But you both need to think about it as the bottom teams in our fantasy league, as well as the construction of your team.
Right.
That's super duper interesting.
Our next matchup here was Brett Johnson versus Danny. And Brett came into the week favored 133 to 129. And Danny won this one 131 to 119. And this really goes back to my last comment of this could be the matchup Brett puts up in the first week of the playoffs and gets bounced.
Yep.
So it's just, is a very good team, could explode any given week. But I'm looking at his roster, lots of red of underperformers with Bijan, Henry, Jefferson. Ferguson got knocked out of the game, so can't beat him for that one. But then Hopkins and Pearsall. That's way too many red marks on a roster for a decent chase week. I should say decent because he's put up 50 so many times. 26 is a great chase week. But you can't make up for that. Herbert and Chase putting up 50 doesn't make up for the rest of your team putting up 20. And again, that's me doing bad math. It's probably like 45 points or 50 points, but still. He could have won easily.
It's super interesting to have people that are so like game script dependent. Like Bijan, if they're getting absolutely blown out, like he is not a part of the game plan. If Derrick Henry, like if they are not trying to run the clock down, if they're in a close game, he's not a part of the game plan. Justin Jefferson, it could go either way. Jamar Chase, that's a losing effort. He had 26 points on 13 targets. That's a great score, but at the same time, like if the Bengals offense gets going, they have running backs that can kind of filter the game. So I do agree with what you're saying. It's a hard thing where it's like you have guys on teams that could either be blowing people out or be playing from behind, and that wildly changes their fantasy outlook on a weekly basis.
And Danny's team didn't look particularly good either, to be honest. We're talking about all the red on Brett's side. I mean, with Devonta Smith, Myers, Kelsey, Ridley, all being quite a bit below expectations. I mean, Danny got really bailed out by having a good Josh Allen game and a good Brees Hall game. We've been bashing Brees Hall a bit, but put up 31 points, and he was very good in that game in terms of stats. The Jets still kind of suck, but Brees looked good at least.
131 would have still won 4, maybe 5 of the games this week. So it always boils down to you got to beat the person that's in front of you, and 131 just wasn't going to get it done.
Yeah, agreed. Our next one here was Max versus Alex, with Max coming in favored 133 to 123. And you said it, beat the person in front of you. Alex won 124 to 99, with Max having a pretty rough performance on this one. So Alex keeps sneaking him out. Not quite sure how the scheduling works, but it's benefiting him this year.
A bad week from the Commanders. Really shit the bed for Max. Tucker Kraft had a goose egg. Picking tight ends this year is really what sets some teams apart. And I think for the entire league, we all agree that we would have loved for Matt to have won this game. And so him shitting the bed feels bad for all of us.
And this is just a product of Max had nobody else to start. Like, you look at his bench, and Dowdle put up nothing. Waddle put up nothing. And he would have loved to have McBride in a tight end spot, and he would have loved to have Neighbors in. Because, again, with those guys, he's not starting Kareem Hunt, and he's not starting Kraft. And he has, again, 2 competent performances and probably a much closer matchup when it's all said and done. But that's the time of the year we're in. If you don't have the bench depth to sub out when everyone's on bye and hurt, you're just going to be out of luck. This is a tough loss for Max. I'm sure he's pretty irritated with 99. But I think we know that if he was going to play well, he needed, or if he was going to win, he needed Daniels, McLaurin, and Williams to be solid.
Yep.
And just didn't get anything from him.
100%.
Our next one here was another blowout. Lizzie versus me. And it was supposed to be a close one according to projections on Thursday, 130 to 129. And Lizzie's team just exploded. So it's kind of the same thing, where last week looks pretty ordinary, good, not great. And this week comes up and puts up, I think 193 must be the highest score of the season. But I think so.
Yeah, man, it continues to feel like Lizzie's team is the team of destiny.
Even with Lamar doing nothing, 15 points out of Lamar, and 4 out of Mooney, and 4 out of Andrews. It's a lot of underperforming for 193.
It is the exact opposite. Like, we're going to get to the Lions offense, but you look at this, and Montgomery and Amon-Ra St. Brown had 62 points, 64 points, 65 points between the two of them. That's outrageous for a running back and a wide receiver to amass that amount of points together on the same team. I think for everything that we said about Brett's team and the normalcy that it can look like, this is the flip side. This is the crooked numbers that a team full of these absolute studs can put up. And it really kind of will boil down to, Xavier Worthy had 16 points on our bench. Valdez-Scantling had 16 points on our bench. Christian Washington had 19 points on our bench. Will boil down to her picking the right people in the playoffs. And I worry that there will be some time where there's going to be 100 points on her bench, and they're just not the right people on her squad in order to move her along the playoffs. But yeah, we've talked about it all year. Her team is incredible. She drafted super well. This is the team of destiny. This is the one to beat. And the best part about it is that she is still 6-5 in our league.
She's had the rough matchups for sure. I think I beat her in a week 2 in a matchup that she probably should have won. And she's had a lot of those where it's just she runs into the teams that explode in a week that she's good but not great. And Bowers, last comment, 16 targets. What the hell are the Raiders doing? That team is just so garbage. All they're doing is throwing. I had that game on the split screen on Sunday, and I'm just watching check down after check down after check down to Bowers for 8 yards, 10 yards, 7 yards. And it's just he's just racking up these little catches, and the team lost by a ton. It was not a close matchup. And it was just like, who's open? Oh, Bowers is open. And we'll just check it onto him. Doesn't matter if it's going to be a first down or not. We're just going to keep giving him the ball. And
it's the PPR league
ugly.
of it all.
I know. And again, he had a lot of yards. 126 yards is insane. But how many I feel like he got almost all of his points. I just bet it. I feel like watching the game, he got almost all of his points at the end of it during garbage time. But again, it wouldn't have mattered. So many points elsewhere that this was lost very early in the day.
100%.
Last one for week 11. We'll wrap this up here. Chris versus Sam, and Chris was favored 124 to 122, which is something you probably don't say very often for Chris's team, being favored for a matchup. And then Sam came in and put up 151 to 146. So Chris actually probably had his best performance of the season, and Sam pulled the rug right off from under him and took the win.
So why don't we skip the recap of this, Tim? Because I think the first weekly award will get us into why Chris ended up losing this matchup.
That's perfect.
Play that clip.
All right. You said it. Weekly award stud of the week is Taysom Hill. I think this one goes without being said. Everybody knew it was coming. 42 points, 3 touchdowns, 206 total yards. Rushing, receiving, passing with 8 receptions. It's insane.
Unreal.
If I told you
Absolutely
that Taysom Hill threw an interception and fumbled the ball, you would have said, like, oh, did he put up 3 points this week? Did they bench him because he turned it over twice? Like, no. The guy just was the whole offense. It was absurd.
Hey, Tim, what is the average age of people in this league?
Oh, God. Chris and Brett are the youngest, and they are 31.
So what, 33, 32?
Probably.
With Alex being the oldest, is Max, how old is Max?
Max is our age.
So Taysom Hill fits right in at average age in this group. He is 34 years old and still scored 42 fantasy points.
Well, didn't his career start at age 28 because he was at a Mormon mission and went to BYU and all that?
Like, who is this guy? Like, he's LaDainian Tomlinson on his best week and fucking, like, Alex Morstead. He's basically a punter on his worst week. So it is absolutely wild that basically that last matchup, the Sam and Chris matchup, came down to Chris versus Taysom Hill, and Taysom Hill came out on top. This is 100%. I drafted him in the last round of every single league that I had, and have dropped him and picked him up and dropped him and picked him up. And the fact that Sam had the wherewithal to play him to get that 42 points is legendary. It's so good, and I absolutely love it. So shout out to her. Good win. I will say that Danny starting Breece Hall, who has been basically unstartable, and that 31 points was essentially the reason that he got the win in his matchup as well. So maybe the Jets are turning around and actually playing their studs again. He's had 2 good weeks now, but the runner-up for our stud of the week is definitely Breece Hall. 31 points is a huge win. And
honestly, he didn't have a choice. It's Jalen Warren or Herbert or Breece Hall.
Woof.
And how do you bench your number one guy even if it's been good? Like you'd feel really stupid if you played well on the bench.
I will say, you and I had a lot of conversations before the season started about me keeping Breece Hall in the first round. I cannot say that I am not happier than a clam, the happiest clam, to have kept Nico Collins and Anthony Richardson, who I have dropped from my team. But I don't know that keeping Breece Hall in the first, that I would have essentially kept him at this point. I think I would have probably dropped him in frustration at a certain point.
You have to sell him. I actually offered Danny to trade a while ago for Breece Hall, and he turned it down.
Nice.
But it wouldn't have mattered. My team wouldn't have impacted me, and he would have lost last week with the package I was giving him anyways, with Breece putting up 31 points. So you never really know with these guys. You can never drop a first round pick. You have to get something for him. But yeah, he had a great week for sure. Dud of the week winners are the Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin stack, because 16 combined points is ugly, and it really should have been a better performance from the two of those guys in a matchup that should have been high scoring against the Eagles. So seeing them do next to nothing was definitely a surprise. I expected a lot more from those two guys.
Yeah, the worry with McDaniels all season has been, if he gets hurt, how do they react? And the offense changed when he got that rib injury. I won't say that he is broken and a bad fantasy asset anymore. It was just that like the first game that he had back from that was a little rough. And so if he is still fully healthy and chucking balls down the field, Max will be fine. That being said, if Jaden Daniels is broken, he's not running and he's not throwing down the field, that is going to be super duper difficult to start on a weekly basis.
Definitely. And I almost like the runner-up here, Aaron Jones, a little more after we talk about this, because he only scored 5 points for Chris in a matchup that he needed more than 5 points. If Chris got 10 points out of Aaron Jones, he gets the win. So that was another one where it's stud of the week, Taysom Hill, put him over the top, or put Sam over the top, and dud of the week, or runner-up dud of the week, Aaron Jones, gave Chris the L. So that was tough for sure.
That's a good one. I also really like your nominee for shaky start of the week, especially as a 49ers fan, with Kittle not playing and Christian McCaffrey is still like, what's his usage going to be? Who did you pick as our shaky start of the week?
I had Ricky Pearsall here, putting up the goose egg. It was more a product of what else he had as options in my mind.
I will say that one of the things that we try to do with shaky start of the week is pick somebody who was a shaky start before the result.
Mm-hmm.
This is by far the worst result that we've had from somebody that we think is a shaky start. I think we generally pick people where it's like Jameson Williams, and he had a great week. This
or
is
Worthy, week one, where he blew up and nobody expected him to do anything.
Another good one. And yeah, so if Lizzie last week had started Xavier Worthy, I think he had like 16 points, 12 points, something like that. That's still a pretty shaky start, because with DeAndre Hopkins and Kelsey coming on, that's still a very shaky start. This is like Ricky Pearsall stepped into the wide receiver 2-3 range in the 49ers offense and put up a fucking goose egg. So it was a shaky start to begin with, and the fact that he didn't produce is not indicative of the award, but heartbreaking in that sense as well.
I have a hard time, again, this is looking at Cedric Tillman. He only put up 7 points last week. So like he didn't have a great performance, but I have a hard time understanding why he wasn't the guy after putting up 18, 28, 19 against pretty good teams, Cincinnati, Baltimore, Chargers. I almost would have rolled the dice on him against New Orleans as well. From my side, I don't know. It's hard because it's like this is all hindsight analysis at this point, anyways. But he's been great with Jameis chucking the ball up to him. The results didn't show up this week or on this Thursday, so I don't know. Even Downs though had a great week, but again, I don't blame him for benching Downs when the quarterback situation is messy. So that one I understand.
100%.
But I almost would have ridden the hot hand, NBA Jam rules, 3 hot weeks in a row, guys on fire. You gotta ride them. Even 7 points would have been better. Wouldn't have made him win, but still different.
Totally. So my Michael Scott, no God, please no award for the person that I am most scared of playing. I hate to do it, but it is the whole reason that I drafted Taysom Hill in most of my leagues. He is the person that I do not want to see on other people's flex spot. It could be 0, it could be 50. Similarly to what Tim said, like he could have a fumble, he could have an interception, he could also have 4 touchdowns, running, receiving, whatever. Like you don't really know what is going to come of that. It is absolutely wild to see somebody who, like, 34 years old, no real consistency in the offense. It is the most variable thing to something where we are all trying to find the consistency of what we are doing. It absolutely blows my mind and breaks my heart, and I will not be excited if he is on the opposing side of my matchup going forward forever.
So the funniest thing about Taysom Hill is he's played 7 games. His stat line is 4 points, 2 points, 14 points, 6, 16, 7, 42. Like, this guy hardly plays. And his snap percentage, like, last week was his highest snap percentage with 55% of the snaps. This guy is a gadget, and he's not reliable, but when he's on the field, they put the ball in his hands.
He's Kyle Juszczyk. He is the 49ers gadget guy. The person that you put the ball in his hands when the defense is not thinking about it, and yet somehow, some way, for 4 years, the Saints continue to feed him the ball.
Well, I will also say this. 2 weeks ago, he put up 16 points against Carolina. Last week, a garbage penalty took away like a 70-yard touchdown run for him or something absurd, and he was 80 yards. So last week should have been 21 points for him. So he should, again, be on fire right now. He should have 3 great weeks back to back to back. And with the Saints being bad, I don't know. Maybe it's just like they'll run gadgets with him the rest of the year. And talking about, you mentioned Daniel Jones and his garbage contract. Have you seen the contract for Taysom Hill? They can't get rid of this dude. They gave him a quarterback salary to be a gadget player 2 years ago and just push stuff off like 6 years into the future. Like, they can't get rid of him. He's 34 and they can't get rid of him for like 4 more years.
Yo, the Saints cap situation is a wild thing. I will not comment on it, but it is one of the most ridiculous things in sports, where they like basically have deferred all of their tenured players' salaries for a number of years, and then like don't have the money to pay young players on their salaries. So eventually they're just going to have like the most replaceable team of anybody ever, and then they'll finally be able to like reboot and reset in like 4 or 5 years. I don't know. It'll be wild. Taysom Hill is wild. More power to him. But fuck, man, if he's in somebody else's flex spot, it's like, oh, I'm either going to win the week because he's going to have 2 points, or lose the week because he's going to have 40, and that's exactly how it's going to go.
I wonder if the league recognized that we both have been drinking today, because our tangents are really on point, that we're getting into the analysis here and we're going sideways on a lot of this. I'm loving it.
I told you well before we started recording that I was sauced already. So
I'm with you. It's all right.
Pow, 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 pow.
But at least I'm being fancy because it's wine, and you've been drinking beer. So I don't know.
Yeah, but Ventura Coast, dog. Check it out. Oh, boom.
Nice.
Wait.
I never heard of that company. And
Me neither.
I lived close to there.
Well,
it's right.
Move back.
No, I'm good. San Diego's pretty great. Sticking here. All right, last one. Jesse Pinkman, he can't keep getting away with it award. I have the Lions offense for this one. And this is less a product.
This is a bad one.
Well, maybe it's bad. This is less of a product of like their team's going to collapse and these players aren't going to do well. But it's driving me crazy watching this team, and they're blowing teams out. And it's a dominant win. They've got the game sealed by halftime. But it's the fourth quarter. All the starters are still in. They're up by 60, and they're still racking up points. At what point is Goff going to take a hit and tear his ACL or something stupid? Or Amon-Ra gets a hamstring injury, and now he's just like hobbled for the playoffs. Or Gibbs gets hurt. Like, it just seems their team's so good. Play other people.
As a Jared Goff owner, there's nothing that I enjoy more than the fact that the Detroit Lions love running up the score. That's great. The thing that I struggle with the Lions offense is there's no consistency. I think that like with the Vikings offense, you can consistently rely upon Aaron Jones getting a ton of touches, Justin Jefferson getting a ton of touches. The Rams offense, you can trust Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, Cooper Kupp. Like there are these offenses that like I feel like every year we disregard because we want the more exciting things. We want the Keon Coleman's and the Xavier Legette's, and like we want to believe in like these high variance new toys that we play with. But we should just believe in Ben Johnson. So like if you would have just drafted David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jared Goff, Jameson Williams, like you would be well set up to win the league every year. So I feel like in terms of this, it's not that Jesse Pinkman can't keep getting away with it. It's like it's just so fucking frustrating that they keep getting away with it.
Mm-hmm.
The funniest part of this to me is the fact that their offense is so prolific and Sam Laporta still sucks.
Yeah,
because like tight end has finally gotten good again. Jonnu Smith has been really good. Brock Bowers is incredible. Travis Kelce has picked it back up. Goddard's been good. Hawkinson is picking it up again. And it's like, hey, Sam Laporta was supposed to be this like absolutely incredible, always on the field, tight end, fucking touchdown machine. And the entire Lions offense is so good that it's like, oh, Sam, you could just be a sixth offensive lineman and we don't ever need you to run a route. And it's absolutely wild. It's so funny.
So this is the last sidetrack that I'm going to do on this one. I can't promise that. Probably not. I guess there was a quote from the coaches of the Lions in the offseason saying, like they asked, like they're excited for Sam Laporta and what he's going to do for the offense this year. And it's like they said their answer was, we had a conversation with Sam about his role is not going to look the same, and he's going to have weeks where he's going to have a role in the offense, but it's not going to look like what he did last year. So they basically said like last year was maybe a product of necessity, and he became involved because they needed him to be involved. And this year they didn't have that same plan if things went according to plan. So it's like, again, this is hindsight, but somebody rolled that quote out in one of the podcasts I listened to. I'm like, interesting. Like we all missed that one because of the hype of him. And it's like, we want the next best tight end. Like everybody's chasing that. And he was that last year. So you assume you're going to get it again. And we very much have not gotten it again.
I totally agree. It's wild. That guy was supposed to be Travis Kelce 2.0, and Brock Bowers has stepped into that space. So,
yep. And then watch Brock Bowers do bad next year because there's no quarterback for the Raiders.
Except for Daniel Jones.
Daniel Jones. The Raiders savior. All right. We're done with this. Let's get into the advertisement break, hear a word from our sponsors, and then we will jump into the Week 12 preview.
Remember that time you had a few too many Mai Tais while sitting on the beach in Hawaii and decided to trade away your star wide receiver? The ridicule you received from your league mates must have been unbearable. But hey, it happens. We've all been there. And if you're one of the unfortunate souls who made a fantasy football trade that you immediately regretted, we're here to help. If this sounds like you, please join the I Woke Up and Cried support group at our weekly meetings. We will share our stories of fantasy football disasters, commiserate over our terrible trades, and offer support to one another. Because let's face it, sometimes the only thing worse than losing your fantasy football league is realizing that it happened because of your terrible decisions.
All right. Well, I guess that was a shot at Alex here. Maybe you'll like your trade at the end of the season, but we'll find out. On to the Week 12 preview. All right. right, first one here. I mentioned Alex again. This one's Chris versus Alex, with Alex going in favored 126 to 125. We talk about Alex having the right matchups and running into the right people. He gets down in his luck, Chris, this week. What do you think about these two?
Super curious about how Adam Thielen will perform in the Carolina offense, as well as Romeo Dubs. So the flex spots on Alex's team are super interesting, but it is really great to see Nick Chubb back to 20 attempts, 59 rushes. The main option at the goal line. I think this is going to be a super close one. 51 to 49 as currently constructed. I think that's kind of the right breakdown of that so far. Should be a good matchup going through Sunday and Monday.
Did you watch the Thursday night game, by the way?
I did. Yeah.
So I watched the first half of it, and it was clear, nothing. And then I came back, and I'm like, oh my God, the whole field's covered in snow. Like, at one point, I felt like I was gone for like 20 minutes, and all of a sudden it went from like light flutters of snow to like, it's a downpour of snow, and all they can do is let Nick Chubb run the ball into the end zone. It was crazy.
It was nuts. The amount of like big plays that got completed in the blizzard were really, really, really impressive. It was super fun. No. It sucked to watch. It was super fun on occasion with the sorts of things that they did. But overall, like, it affected. I don't know that it really affected the overall scores too much. I mean, so the next matchup we're going to talk about is Sam versus Max, and in that matchup, Jerry Jeudy caught all 6 of his targets for 85 yards. That's a really good line when you were essentially playing in a blizzard.
I'm not sure when he put up his points, though. I think that's always part of the thing, is that if you put up those points in the first half when it was mostly clear, then not so bad. When I was watching at the end, I just don't remember any big plays from those teams. Like, a lot of the stuff was decent passes. It was intermediate to short range passes that were being completed, from what I remember.
Fair. I just don't think that there were a lot of big plays to be had in general, just based on the way that both of those teams are playing. Pittsburgh does not give up a lot of big plays. Cleveland has a really great pass rush, so like big plays are a little bit more mitigated in that sense. I think that those were 2 really good opportunistic teams in that sense. And going back to the Sam versus Max of it all, I think this will really boil down to, like, I don't think there's anything that separates either of these teams from each other. Like, maybe Max's running backs are a little bit better than Sam's are, but Ken Walker and Austin Eckler with the if the game script is right, wins that a little bit. And there's a opportunity for George Kittle to have a huge game as the safety outlet versus Trey McBride against the Seattle not linebacking core. So I don't know. I think that one will be super close as well.
We talked about this, and it's kind of the make or break week for some teams. And Max has his more or less his full starting roster. In his catching week, he's catching Sam running the best week possible, with Taysom Hill, Joe Burrow, London, and Wilson on bye. So 4 starters for Sam's team are on her bench now, and she's going to be forced to start Goddard, Rashad White, and I'm not sure who else she'd sub out. Maybe Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed's been good, but I'm sure she'd rather be putting in London or Garrett Wilson at this point with what they've been doing the past few weeks compared to Reed. So I think Max is a good shot at it. I think there's some question marks for his team as well with Dowdle and Hunt. I would be nervous playing them given their history, but he's favored. I mean, he should come away with a win based on who they're rolling out this week.
Yep.
Next one here was you versus Danny, with you favored 124 to 101. I didn't click into this one beforehand to see if Danny's hadn't set his roster yet, but he is just, I guess he needs a kicker. So he'll be a little bit better once he gets that set. But a tough week for him with Allen and Breece Hall on bye. With you mostly ahead, Kamara's your guy on bye.
I don't know. It's easy to say. If Denny Breslow is as bad at talking on a fantasy football podcast as he is at managing his fantasy football team, this is going to be an easy win for me. So I fully expect to absolutely trounce him in this matchup and embarrass him to the point where he deserves to leave the league at the end of this week. So, Tim, I hope that you have backups because Danny is garbage at fantasy football, and the best player on his starting lineup is somebody that I dropped 2 weeks ago because of his low snap rate. And if Bo Nix and Javonte Williams beat me, then I will retire from fantasy football forever.
I was going to say, I was going to pick a bet for you too of what would happen if he beats you. And it wasn't retire from fantasy football because that's pretty extreme. But I was going to say, like, I've been seeing, I follow some Reddit pages.
Tim, what you're asking is if I can beat myself at fantasy football. Because all that Danny Breslow has done is he has taken my leftovers. He's taken my garbage and repurposed it against me. And if that is enough on this random Sunday, any given Sunday, as Al Pacino would say, to beat me, fine. I will retire from fantasy football, but I do not expect his garbage squad, his lack of thoughtfulness, his absolutely Tim, he's got 3 tight ends.
Yeah, I get it.
If this beats me, I will.
In his defense, Njoku has had good games, so he's had his games to play, and Auden and Kelsey are both guys that should be started. So that's legitimate. I still think you're right. I think you win.
Aggressively mediocre.
You're being aggressively overconfident for a guy starting Hunter Henry.
Okay, wait. Hold on. Timothy, my dude. Hunter Henry last week played 88% of snaps, had 9 targets. He has had 9 or more targets on 3 occasions. Hunter Henry is a good tight end on my squad.
But he plays well every other week, Brett. And he played well last week, so he's going to put up 2 points this week.
Oof, man, if I lose to Danny Breslow this week, I will add an extra $50 to the winner's pool for this. I just do not believe that a absolute sham of a podcast host can bring himself to even hope to challenge me because he has been absolute garbage.
What you should do is, have you heard of the zombie leagues where if somebody beats you, they get to take one of your players off your team? If Danny beats you, you have to trade him somebody from your roster, and you have to swap a player. That would be funny. It sounds like not fair.
Will have already passed.
But we'll know one way or the other by the time that Monday night matchup's rolling around if you're going to win it or not. And that's one of those things that it's like, this is borderline like totally inappropriate trades because they're not fair, they're not balanced, and you're betting stuff on it. So it's like, yeah, it shouldn't be allowed. But also, you're supposed to be good, and Danny's not doing well. So I think the league might support you losing a good player.
When do trades reopen amongst the draft?
It opens right as the draft is over.
Oh, right as the draft is over. So I can't trade. I can't trade like a 3rd round pick for like a 6th and a 7th.
You might be able to. I'm not sure. I've never tried to do that.
All right, we'll talk logistics. All I'm trying to say is Danny Breslov sucks at fantasy football. That's all I'm trying to say.
All right, we'll figure out a way for you to tank your team if you lose to Danny.
And
we'll solve that later.
Also, fantasy football podcasting.
All right. I think your arrogance has exceeded the standard bounds, and probably everybody's rooting against you now and cheering for Danny. So let's move on.
Suck a butt, Danny. You're bad at fantasy football.
Brett's our new league villain. It's been decided. All right. Next one here is Lizzie versus Katie. Lizzie's favored 123 to 118. Lizzie, if you lose to Katie, I'm not sure what to say. And also, you've updated your roster, so you're now projected to win 136 to 118. Katie, I'm really sorry for your team. I think even a standard week out of Lizzie is probably enough to win this one with who you're rolling out. I'm not sure what else there is to say here, Brett.
Dude, I don't know.
Say something nice.
I don't know. I think okay, wait. Here it is. If the Chicago Bears figure it out and have an incredible game against a wonderful Minnesota Vikings defense, there's a world in which Katie can win this game. But
is it the same world we're living in where Danny beats you?
I do not expect that to happen. Like, there is a lot that needs to go right. Chuba Hubbard is playing a really good Kansas City defense. DJ Moore and Keenan Allen are playing a really good Minnesota defense. Tony Pollard is playing Houston that probably has Will Anderson back. Christian McCaffrey is playing a Green Bay defense that is basically going to set up to beat them. There's a world in which this happens, but with Mike Evans finally coming back, Marvin Harrison being good again, I don't know. But there's a world. Lizzie is definitely going to win this game.
Yeah, that's it. Our matchup of the week here, I have Brett versus myself. And this isn't because our teams are going to be good and our teams are going to perform well. But this is I think it's a make or break game for both Brett and I, where Brett needs a win. He's at 6-5 and sitting in the playoffs currently. But if he loses, he's right in the thick of things of getting booted and not making it. And I need to win everything on the way out is really what it comes down to. I need to probably win 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3 games to have a chance here. So that's why this is the game of the week. It's really the one with the most riding on it, it seems, at this point in the season.
It's also super rough that, like, both of you guys are down some of your best players. So you're not having Devontae, him not having Chaser, Bijan. This one will be a good one to monitor going forward, especially like your quarterbacks are playing against each other. Tyrone Tracy, who knows how that's going to go. Yeah, I don't know. This is going to be a fun one. I think this will end up being super close. If that one's not within 10 points of each other, I think it'll be because of one like giant fantasy score at the end of the day.
Yeah, and for myself, missing Devontae, I don't think really impacts things one way or the other. He probably would have been on my bench regardless with the way my lineup was constructed with my 4 receivers. Odds are I would have started Pickens over him, hoping for the big games that Pickens had putting up recently. So even if I had Devontae,
how many points do you get for getting into a fight?
I wish, because if he got, I think that he should get 6 points for fight in the field, because he would have put up 30-something points with how many fights he had. But also, this is my comment on Pickens. I love the guy. He's really talented when he cares for the 30% of plays on the field. And then he's totally disinterested for the other 70%, which is hilarious. Because like you watch the last Hail Mary of the game, and the dude just runs out at the back of the end zone and gets in a fight with the quarterback. And it's like, didn't even make an attempt to come back on the ball. The most hysterical ending for him. And then you hear the commentators is like, oh yeah, Pickens didn't follow Russ back across the field as soon as he was scrambling, kind of just gave up on the play. It's like, that's totally his MO. Like, if he's interested, he's good. But more often than not, he's not interested.
All right, Tim, pick your biggest blowout and pick the closest game
Of this week?
or biggest win and only upset.
Ooh, only upset. I'm picking Chris over Alex. Biggest blowout is Lizzie versus Katie. Are you doing we both listen to The Ringer now. Is this like your Costanza kind of thing?
No, I'm not going to do a Costanza thing because I don't watch Seinfeld.
Okay.
But I will fully agree with you that I think that the biggest blowout will be Lizzie versus Katie, only because that's how I ended up last week. But I think that the biggest upset will be, well, it's not upset as it's currently calculated, but in terms of record will be Max over Sam.
I'm going to take it back. I think Danny beats you, actually, and I think that your team sucks so bad. You're going to be crying all day long on Sunday, and Danny's going to be like, ha, 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 my team's so much better than Brett. Brett's a terrible podcaster. He's really bad at football. Just kidding. No.
Hey,
Danny's
fuck you, Danny.
All right.
Danny's a bitch.
Our analysis is fantastic. Brett's on his 17th beer. It's 10:30 at night, and this podcast is over. Last thought, Brett. 10:30 on a Friday, 10 years ago, where would you have been?
Fuck, how old am I? 24, so I'm in Austin. I would have been at I would have been at a bar on 6th Street in Austin called Einstein's. Einstein's had $5 liquor pitchers. So it was a single liter plastic pitcher of whatever you wanted. And so you could get a pitcher of like Long Island iced tea. They would put a big straw in it. And I wouldn't remember how it went after that.
Isn't it amusing how 10 years ago you would have been out partying, and now our fun on Friday night is sitting here talking shit to Denny Breslow and recording a podcast?
That's funny because if you had asked me how I would have been 13 years ago, it would have been still me getting drunk in a place talking shit to Denny Breslow.
Just would have been in my garage doing it.
Correct. Still love you, babe.
It's all right. His beard was better than yours, and you had to get yours trimmed up and cleaned up so that way you can come back and look presentable.
Yo, his beard was better than mine?
His beard is way better than yours.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah. Your beard was looking a little bit shaggy before you got it cleaned up by your girl in Austin.
Oh, yeah. My beard before this was absolutely awful.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about gross beards, like your beard was the Denny Breslow's football team in this league.
Dude, it was like, it was so nasty. But Brett Johnson, let's be real. Brett Johnson really wanted to fuck my beard. He... You know?
I don't know. I really don't know what you're trying to say. And I'm hoping you're going to educate me, but there's really nothing more to be added. I think that's it. I think we're just going to be left on this confusing note, and we're going to...
No, I'll show the receipts. He texted me a lot, and he was like, hey, man, good beard.
All right, well, post the receipts in the chat and prove it, because right now I think the league decided your beard sucks and Denny's is better. I think is what we decided.
What?
Yeah.
Trade me your running backs.
All right. Good luck, everybody. We're ending this here before Brett drinks on the beer and goes on another tangent.
Love you guys.
See you soon.